Hello and welcome to Don't IEP Alone. I'm Lisa Lightner, as usual, and welcome to my simple little podcast about IEPs. And the reason I call it a simple little podcast is that I no longer have a podcast manager. I very infrequently do guests, although if you have something that you'd like to shout from the mountaintop and be on the program, please drop me an email. It was just very time consuming to kind of go out and solicit guests when I have so many advocacy clients. And I do very little editing because I'm a I'm a dinosaur who struggles with the editing software. So it is what it is. It's a simple little podcast about IEPs and other stuff. I thought that I would be talking about an issue like all these things are happening in the world, and I was like, okay, next week I'll talk about that, next week I'll talk about that. And now we're at the point where I 4 things have happened since the last time I recorded episodes. So let me just jam them all in here because time has passed. But in case you hadn't heard about them, I want to give you the information. But if you have heard, you're not going to be bored and be like, I know this already. I heard this already. So we're going to talk about, or I want to talk about the RFK statements, Dr. Oz statements, the executive order, and then, of course, the Supreme Court case. So cram those all into about 15 or 20 minutes. Of course, I'm sure you heard by now that RFK said some stuff. I'll just leave it at that. Some things about autistic people. They'll never play baseball. They'll never pay taxes. Blah blah blah. And the autistics of the world who do pay taxes and who do play baseball, got very offended. And then the severe or profound autism community, they got all upset because they're like, no, he's not talking about you. He's talking about people like my kid, and we do need a cure and all that. I have it all on the site if you want to look at what he actually said, and I actually have the video as well of his exact words. So no, I'm not taking them out of context or anything like that. I don't even know what to say except, words do matter. I do try to focus on what people do rather than what they say. But the fact is that this man has a lot of power in this country and a lot of power in arenas that affect our families. So it does matter what he says. That said, he hasn't done anything. He's done a whole lot of talking in the past 71 years, but he hasn't done a lot of action. He's a lawyer by trade. He's arguably got one of the, I'm going to say, top 5 monikers in this country, and he's certainly got the number 2 Kennedy moniker. I would say that people would say that the name JFK is more famous than RFK, but it's certainly the most second famous Kennedy name in this country. Yeah, and so here's the thing: his aunt founded Special Olympics, if you remember. RFK and JFK had a sister who had a disabled daughter. Of course, many people have heard, the lobotomy, all that. Botched lobotomy, I might add. So then as a result, she founded the Special Olympics. So that was his aunt. And then, of course, there was another Kennedy brother, Ted, who passed away, I want to say 10-ish years ago, maybe give or take. He was, for a period of time, he was a very powerful U.S. senator. And he was also, for a time, the ranking senator on the Senate Help Committee. And Senate Help is health, education, labor, and pensions. So all these things like ADA and ACA and IDEA and all those different laws, they originate in committee and they originate in that committee. So all that to say that RFK, with his wealth, privilege, stature, and opportunity, he has had 71 years to quote unquote fix or cure autism, and he hasn't done it. So um I don't I he doesn't deserve, in my mind, the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't deserve um this whole concept of, oh, give him a chance, give him a chance. Well, why? He's had 71 years. He's had the opportunity. Why now? I think it's an ego stroke. I think that he recognizes that autism parents are a vulnerable population. They are a population who have been ignored and not listened to for decades. Um, and so that makes us vulnerable. And so people are clinging because they say they finally feel heard. And it's bizarre, this whole thing of like, finally someone's researching autism, because people have been researching autism for decades. And in fact, he cut the funding for that research. So I'm not sure how you're going to make this promise that you're going to cure it by September or find the cause by September when you've just cut all the funding. And that's not even getting into this Dr. Greer, who's not even really a doctor, that he hired. And that guy's a complete fraud. Complete fraud. So yeah, so that's that. If you want to reach out to your legislators about that and tell them, how all of this affects your family personally, things like that, and that we do need money for autism research. The research has been going on. Like I said, the funding it's just been cut. But the people who have been doing the research aren't these flashy celebrity types. They're just doctors and researchers working hard at something they're passionate about. So that's that. Again, I've posted about it numerous times on my Facebook page. I have it on my site as well if you want to take a look at that. Then, fun, the very next day, Dr. Oz spoke up. And of course, he's been asked to run Medicaid and Medicare. And that dude, man, if ever there was a snake oil salesman, like where did he go so wrong? We know him here in Pennsylvania. We do. I, of course, live on the state line of Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. And he went to a school here, maybe about 10 or 15 miles away. And if you remember, he ran for Senate a couple of years ago, and he didn't even live here when he listed his mother-in-law's address. He was like total carpetbagger. Pennsylvanians saw right through it. But man, I'll be the first to say, like 20 years ago or whatever, when he first started coming on Oprah, like I thought he was pretty cool. I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty cool, and like seems to know what he's talking about. And I don't know where this guy took a U-turn, but he did. No public health experience. He's a doctor, right? That's great that he's a doctor and an accomplished doctor, but he's not a public health doctor or a policy expert. And if I could compare it to veterinary medicine, and I have several veterinary vet friends who will tell you that, being a one-on-one vet when someone brings in their pet to you is completely different from herd management, which is what some large animal vets have to do, with cows and pigs and things like that. And when you're talking about a herd, it's a completely just different perspective and how you treat the issues. But anyway, so he was running his mouth, and he basically just said, like, well, just stop being so chronically ill all the time, and that, like, this is your own fault. You're a drain on resources, and all these different things, which, of course, myself and other people took offense to. I don't know why MAGA isn't taking offense to it. He's just like, it was just basically like this is all your fault, and just make better choices and you won't be ill anymore, which is just like it's a dumb fucking thing to say. So that was that. Then this all happened within, like, I think the same 48 or 72 hours. An executive order came out about school discipline. And so the important thing to keep in mind here is that it was just an executive order with some guidance. And to be honest, I've struggled over the years getting schools to follow the guidance letters that I agreed with. So it is just a guidance letter. Are they going to agree with it, follow it? I don't know. It certainly opens the door for a lot of negativity for our kids. Excuse me. It certainly creates a lot more seats on the school to prison pipeline, which is very real. But what this executive order said is just basically punish all kids equally and focus on the behavior and don't focus on the circumstance. Don't take anything in context. Just punish. And of course, IDEA procedural safeguards say the exact opposite of that. And it says that context matters and that manifestation hearings should be done. So I will be updating that post, double checking it, making sure that it's as thorough and robust as that post needs to be. But yeah, so that was that. Then one other thing this week is that the Supreme Court heard a case, an IEP case. So I put this on Facebook the other day as well. But if you're a nerd like I am, you can. I don't know if you knew this. When the Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments on cases, the general public is invited to go listen. You just have to show up in the morning and get in line. I mean, that's really all there is to it, and it is first come, first serve. So depending on the popularity of the issue, will tell you the popularity or how early you need to be there in the morning. And all the information is on the SCOTUS website. And in fact, I had a train ticket. I was supposed to go hear the Andrew case when that was being heard. I made some plans with some friends, and I was really excited about it. And then Kevin got the flu, and then I got the flu. So even though we had our flu shots, it certainly wasn't as bad as it could have been. But I thought, I'm not going to go into this packed courtroom with the flu, even though I kind of did feel well enough to travel. But anyway, so my friends went without me. They said it was amazing. Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually spoke and asked some questions. So to kind of actually, like, if you're a nerd like I am, to kind of hear that in person and be there for it live is a pretty amazing thing. And again, all their upcoming cases are on their calendar, and it's 2 blocks over from the train station if you live somewhere where you can take the train. And that's just it. You get up in the morning and take the train in and drive in, whatever, and go. But I did not go. Just a little side note. But so the case this week, it was not a traditional like FAPE case in that the parents were not they were not saying that their child did not receive FAPE. Like they did initially when the first due process hearing. It was about FAPE, and yes, the parents prevailed in that, and the school was required to beef up that IEP. Why this was of particular interest to me, in addition to just being an IEP case, is that the young woman involved in the case has Lennox-Gastaut. So my son also has Lennox-Gastaut. So, that just kind of, I just know how hard this life is to live sometimes when you have Lennox-Gastaut. It's hard on my son. It's hard on him. And I think, like, my goodness, despite all that, you found it within you to actually take this all the way to the Supreme Court. So what was different here is that they got the IEP beefed up, but what happened was that they were suing for damages. And at the heart of this case, and now I'm not a lawyer and I don't play one on the internet, but the parents were seeking monetary damages, money, compensation for the discrimination that they felt she endured. And so, again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to like start talking like one. if I'm not one and get myself into trouble. This is how I understand it. But there's a burden of proof kind of level that you have when you're seeking monetary damages. Right now, the standard is when you're going to sue a school for bad faith or gross misjudgment, that if you're just a school, you have to prove bad faith or gross misjudgment. So, what that means is like you really have to prove that the school was just evil and that they knew what they were doing and that they deliberately and maliciously were doing this to this child, right? And that's just legally, that's a very high standard to prove that, like, again, that the school was just acting very maliciously. I don't know how else to say it. Um, I say, like, think about like the guy twirling his mustache, right? Like that they were just villains in this and that they were out to harm this family. That can all obviously be very difficult to prove. What the parents' attorneys were arguing was that holding a family to this standard is unreasonable, and that the standard that a family in this situation should be held to is that the school acted with deliberate indifference. Deliberate indifference is a lot easier to prove. So basically what you're saying is like the school knew that this was harmful to the kid, but they just kind of like shrugged. And it's kind of like they were lazy, they were indifferent, but they weren't maliciously out to harm this child. They just didn't care that she was being harmed, which both, don't get me wrong, they're both disgusting. And I'm so sorry that this child endured this, especially when I know what she's enduring with living with Lennox-Gastaut. But again, proving that the district knew that there was a problem, that they just chose to ignore it, and that, not proving that they were evil, just that they chose to look the other way. That's a much lower standard of proof. So that is what is at the heart of this issue here, is that why are we holding special needs families to this level that they have to prove that the schools were being malicious when most of the time they are just being deliberately indifferent? And again, that's much easier to prove. Based on what I've read online, it sounds like the justices were sympathetic to the family. And in fact, that Amy Coney Barrett, who I'm not a huge fan of, she did actually pose the question that she didn't really understand. Like, why are we holding a student like this to this higher standard? So anyway, it's the end of April, and this decision, they said, it will be out this summer. The long-term implications, I think could be, they can be far-reaching, right? Good or bad, because if it turns out, if the precedent is set, if the Supreme Court sets this precedent that, parents only have to prove not necessarily that the district was malicious, but that there was a problem and they just chose to ignore it. That's again, that's a much lower standard to reach, and that could mean that a lot of parents are suing for damages. The flip side of that is, if the Supreme Court decides against this family, and agrees and says that no, you have to prove the malice, the bad faith, then schools will continue to get away with their bullshit, because that has been one of the protectors of districts, and that is why excuse me, I've been screaming for well over a decade when people go, I'm just going to sue the school. And I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. You can try, but it's hard to even find lawyers to take the case because they knew that there was this standard. So anyway, anxious to hear that. So that's 4 things. If you want to review on my website, the only thing I have not gotten published on my website yet is anything about the SCOTUS case. And I don't know that I will until maybe after the decision. Who knows? But RFK Jr., we need to get rid of that guy. Seriously, Dr. Oz, we need to get rid of that guy. The executive order, bleh. Call your legislators about that. It's such bullshit. It lessens the protections for our kids. It makes them more vulnerable, plain and simple. And it lets schools out of accountability. And then, of course, the SCOTUS case is certainly one to watch. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. My book is number 1 in its category in Amazon, which is exciting. I keep forgetting to talk about it. But you can look me up, Lisa Lightner. Just look for me on Amazon. Look for me at Barnes & Noble, because I think Barnes & Noble has it at 25% off right now. I think my editor, my managing editor, she must hate me because she tells me things and I forget. But take a look for that, and you can pre-order it now. Other than that, enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of your week.